Hey there, Groovesters, Groove Stars. Ridgely here with another Lessons from the CEO. In this case, we have with us a very serious serial entrepreneur. I love those guys. I am one of those. They're all a little strange, but we appreciate them. The founder of contentconcussion.com, as well as the OMG Academy, and a new friend that I'm excited to spend some time with, Josh Beechraft. Thank you so much, brother, for being here with us to share some wisdom.
Oh man, it's my pleasure. I always love being in a room with you, whether digitally or not. And I've enjoyed our conversations and interactions. I'm excited to do this.
So let me ask you a question. I
Yep.
think entrepreneurs, guys like us, are psychologically unemployable. We just can't do the boss thing. Forget that. That we have poor memories of the things that did not work out and an underdeveloped sense of fear. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely psychologically unemployable. I like that terminology. I've turned down offers for an awful lot of money because it was going to require employment, and I just can't do it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. The fear thing, I think for me, fear is part of what drives it. Like I'm constantly analyzing what might be the threat or the problem, and that actually motivates me into the right actions. So I think it's a different development of fear, probably. And then what was the middle one that you said?
Um, Poor memories,
Poor
because
memories.
we kind of let go of those failures fairly quickly and sort of say,
Yes.
hey, it was a lesson, therefore it's not a
Oh,
failure. I'm moving ahead.
yes, literally within seconds. Like there's zero time to spend licking your wounds or sulking in something that didn't work because there's no knowledge in that. There's no benefit to it. There's nothing to gain. You just, cool, that part didn't work. What can work better than that? Let's go in that direction. Yes.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit, take us back a little. Were you always an entrepreneur? Did it start from a very early time frame? A lot of times you have people that make the transition from the other side. Personally, I've had one job per se, a job when you collect a check. It
Yep.
lasted 30 days. That was it in my entire life. But just asking the question of you.
Yeah, so I do think it was something that started early on with me. I remember being, man, I don't remember what grade it was, maybe seventh grade. Um, I wanted to buy a new bike. And the only way that I could figure out how to do that, I mean, we were middle class. We weren't rich, we weren't poor, but I never really let any of those things stop me one way or the other. It was like if I wanted something, I was going to figure out how to get it. And I went around, started knocking on doors, offering to mow people's lawns, and that was kind of the first adventure into business. And it's funny, I remember I was like, I'm going to start at this date because I just didn't want to start any sooner than that. And people were like, why are you waiting till that date? And I was like, well, that's just when I felt like starting. And I'm in seventh grade, right? And they're like, well, how about you do it tomorrow and I'll give you an extra $5? And I was like, there's something to this entrepreneur thing. So yeah, I think that was in my initial kind of uh, uh, experience with it.
Mm-hmm. And then from there, how did it evolve into getting into obviously the digital space, the digital world where you're now a true master and very, very well respected? How did that journey unfold?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of an obscure journey for me. In high school, I was kind of the shy, weird kid. I didn't really understand social dynamics. I didn't get people, right, and like I didn't understand why they didn't get me either. And so it was like nobody would expect me to be in this position now for sure that knew me back then. But the thing that I think happened that was interesting is my high school aptitude test. If you remember those, it had these like bar graphs of different things you're probably good at based on questions that were asked. I'd like to go back and take one of those again just to see what those questions were now. But mine was flat line to the left and flat line to the right, and one thing spiked to 98% in the middle,
Hmm.
and that was mechanical inclination. And what that ultimately translates to is that I love to know how things work. Like I don't function unless I can be figuring out how something works, which kind of inspired a love for learning, right? Like I'd love to learn different things. And what kind of broke me out of my shell that got me not just into a more entrepreneurial world, but also helped me understand social dynamics was I had a small series of things happened where I learned about magic, and I became a magician because I wanted to understand how things worked, not because I wanted to trick people or show them or be a showman, right? It was just literally like, I need to know how this thing is happening. And through that journey, people kept going, do a trick. And I'd be like, no, I don't want to. And they'd be like, but do it anyways. And I ended up getting good enough at it that people wanted to hire me. And they kind of forced me into business and forced me into social interactions that got me out of my shell. And from being a magician, there's actually a weird amount of magicians that are into marketing because you're just dealing with psychology all the time. And it's human interaction. How do I motivate and draw focus here and do this thing and analyze these situational things that could occur and account for them in real time in the midst of a performance that nobody can see through? It's not too different than marketing, right? You're accounting for market perceptions and fluctuations and building presentations that are bulletproof, even under test conditions and so on and so forth. So a little bit of a maybe different journey than most, but I was pulled into this.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I've had the privilege and pleasure of seeing you do some of these tricks, and they're super ridiculous. It's like, how the hell did he? I remember sitting around with a number of very senior online marketers that are very accomplished, and all of us sitting there with our face on the floor going, okay, what did you just do, man? How did you just do that? And that whole misdirection thing, it really is. I can completely see, now that you mentioned it, I never thought of it before, how that translates into marketing, and how do you get people to focus on the thing that you want them to focus on so that they're not paying attention to what could be an objection or whatever. I mean, say a little more about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So it's really important to obviously understand in marketing, like what we're doing a lot of times is controlling perceptions to the extent that we're asking people to focus in a way that shuts off all of the other noise, draws them into a specific place where we have some kind of influence to help them make a decision that could be meaningful to them, right? I'm not into like, one of the things that I really kind of struggled with early on was like, with magic, you're doing deception, which is kind of a negative thing in most cases for the sake of entertainment and good things, right? And like, I kind of struggled with that initially when I started learning marketing. And they're like, oh, well, the headline needs to hook people like this, and we're using this psychological trigger. And it's not necessarily deceptive, but it's like, you know, we're really stacking the deck in our favor if we're playing into those things. But I think it's important, one, to like realize that this is a really ethical thing that we do in helping clear out clutter to help people make an educated and informed decision. And the skill set to be able to do that require you to sort of account for factors that they wouldn't be able to on their own. They wouldn't be able to shut off Facebook for a minute to watch my ad if I didn't have a clever hook. And then if I wasn't saying something compelling in the next breath that helped elevate their status in a meaningful way, to where they could decide whether or not they wanted to continue on that path, right? And magic is no different. Like you probably heard me say in some of those tricks, like one of my tricks I always say, like, hey, you have to say some of the most ridiculous things to justify what I'm about to do. Well, that sets a frame of like, well, what could that a curiosity, right? Like there's a hook to that. And then it's like, okay, we'll start moving down the path of the trick. And for you to see the end, you have to just stay with me. And I control and carry you on that journey the whole time. And there's an interesting level of respect you have to have for the audience in carrying them on that journey to take them to an end goal where it's to their benefit. And that's the thing that I love the most about like how I correlate the sort of meta fundamentals of magic into marketing is that same thing of taking somebody on that journey to where they're excited about the outcome of what they experienced in your marketing.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. I never thought about that like that before. And I'm always amazed when I have a chance to learn something new. So thank you for that. That's super cool.
Of course.
Now, as a serial entrepreneur, what do you think are the two most important characteristics for being successful in that capacity?
Yeah, I think one, you really have to be willing to not be too stuck on yourself. Like, you've got to be willing to learn. You've got to be willing to take criticisms and constructive criticisms, and you got to realize that. And maybe one thing to help with being able to do that is you have to realize that it's not really about you. In fact, even though it's your thing and like you're on this journey and it's because you have a dream and you're doing these things, like, it's not about you in any way, shape, or form. It's about the people that you're going to help through your services. And I think if you don't have that mindset, business can be a very stressful and jarring kind of business, or activity rather, to be involved in. So I think it's really a level of humility and understanding that servant leadership goes beyond just how you run your family or friendships or teams or anything like that. It's also how you run your customers, right? So
yeah, I think that's very, very interesting. We do in my company, most of our customers are high ticket customers, right? Mm-hmm. We don't really have anybody that's less than 50K a year kind of thing, but outside of my mastermind. And you really do have to think like that. How am I serving that person? What am I doing for them? Am I listening enough to what they need, not what I think they need? What are they saying to me? Really, really key. And I'm a huge believer in being a servant leader to the nth degree. What else can I do? How else can I support? Really, really key, I think. Yeah. So one of my favorite questions is, tell us about a setback, some error, something that you went through, overcame, or learned from, and give us the takeaway from that.
Let's see. It's one of those things with having
been very few. I know there's been very few.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to have to, you're causing me to dig deep here. No, it's that short memory thing. Going back in time to those things. So there's certain lessons that are maybe not a business lesson that I kind of like, they kind of stand out as like a core mistake in thinking that I was making that compounded into business lessons. And I certainly have business failures. So I'll maybe touch on both of those for a second. My first real venture into business was back 2005, I think. And I mean real venture, meaning like, debt was taken on and there was a storefront and this was like a business and there was things to run. And I was honestly too immature. I think so were my partners to actually understand how to make this partnership work. We understood the mechanics of doing the work, but we didn't really know how to run a business. Certainly not together. And that's where that's one of the first places I learned that you can't be in it for yourself, right? That whole thing failed and crashed. It ended up in court between all the partners and it was just a big mess, right? And it was like, all right, well, if this is what business is like I got a lot of growth and a lot of thinking to do as to whether or not I want to be in business. And clearly that's not what business is like. That's just what uneducated business is like. So I think that's where I first learned that real lesson. And I also learned that you can learn more through your failures than you'll ever learn through your pursuit of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of that's an interesting statement for me to say because that's what I do the most is pursue knowledge. But there's something about intense failures like that make you never forget, right? It's not just knowledge, it's actual wisdom that you integrate. And secondarily to that, like key points where I seen like an error in thinking, I guess it sort of leans back into that servant leadership idea. I remember one of my business coaches, a mutual friend of ours, Tim, many years ago, one of the things that like really cracked me open in how I was thinking is I didn't realize I was putting myself and other people into a hierarchical structure. I wasn't looking at people evenly and equally as just people with talent doing what they do best. It was more of like, how am I positioning them in my mind based on where they'd be good and this and that, which you have to do on a team, but it's different when you start. There's a different level of personal connection there, where it's not like you're better than me or I'm better than you. It's you're good at this and I'm good at this. How do these connect? And that little shift, it doesn't sound like much, but that little shift is a small hand swings a big door, because now you can actually work together instead of this weird psychological separation. So that was one of the big moments where I was like, oh, I'm way off in my thinking and I didn't even realize it. So
yeah, very interesting, man. I had a little bit of a personal setback in the past week. My daughter, who is a professional ballerina and just got her first monster role, major role, soloist, all this stuff, she actually got injured the first day of rehearsal. And it was one of those at the beginning. She wouldn't call me. She wouldn't tell me. She wouldn't whatever. So I find out, and I'm like, okay, is this career ending? Is it this? Is it that? Is it whatever? And finally, yesterday, I got her on the phone and she said, a lot of tears and a lot of whatever. But at the end of this, she said, Dad, I'm going to come out of this so appreciative about life. And there's so many things that I already see. And I can't even walk right now. I literally have to move with crutches or crawling on the floor. But the head of my dance company said to me, and it kind of was a little kind of mean, said, Camille, it happens to all of us. Just get over yourself. There's a place here as soon as you're well. And it was like, okay, tough love a little bit, but probably the right thing that she needed to hear to reframe that thing and say, okay, I'm going to be out for 6 weeks. It may be 10 weeks. I don't know, but it goes by really fast. And then I'll be able to resume again with a whole new perspective on how to approach life and this journey, especially as an artist. And I know you being an artist also in many ways, magician, musician stuff, marketer, you know exactly what that's like.
100%. I certainly hope she heals up nicely and does well with it. And I'm glad to hear that that's the perspective that she's come to on it, because that moment is truly make or break in one aspect of life, and certainly in business. If you take that hit the wrong way in business, the same kind of like that same level of slowing down to almost a complete stop, and you don't take that the right way and you don't move the right way with it, you could be done. I've met people that have just chose to never do business again, and it's like, well, you were just not in a situation that was inspiring enough for you to do this. Like, you're talented enough to be doing it, but they're stuck mentally on it. And I'm glad that she's got that kind of support and that kind of thinker to be like, hey, this isn't a thing. Like, we just move on.
Yeah. Just pick yourself up and do it again. And especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, I mean, I love to tell people I've actually started 45 companies. 2 or 3 of them were successful. 4 or 5 were moderately successful. And the rest were highly educational.
Yep.
As in, I learned a lot more from the dumbass things that I've done that failed miserably than I learned from the ones that were successful. Oh, okay, great. We're winning. Okay, good job. Nice. Okay, where do you pick up the lessons from? Not from there. So talk to us a little bit about mentorship. How has that impacted you and in your enterprises?
It's vital. And it's honestly something that I resisted a lot. One of the things about not being able to really have a job is, for me, is like a huge resistance to authority. I don't like to be put in a box and told what to do. I like to be given a problem and asked to solve it. And that one difference can change everything and how our interactions go. I'm more mature about it now, so I know how to navigate it. But in the past, it would, that would be a real thing that I had to figure out. And having the right mentor that you can trust to explain something like that to, and they can help you move through your own thinking to see how like I want to be careful with the language I use, because it's not that anybody's wrong in this case, but there is a level of like, in the way that you're in the direction you're trying to go, like you're doing it wrong, and having somebody explain that. The truth is that we don't grow up intentionally. We grow up reactionally. we're happy, something happens, we react to it. We don't know any better. And that starts to build a personality over time. And having somebody that can give you the perspective to sort that out, to see how you can better apply your real genius and talents in the right direction. For me, it's everything. And it was that with magic. It was that with guitar. It's that with marketing. It's everything that I've done has always been looking to a mentor in some way to help me see the things that I'm not seeing, and understanding that that's only going to empower me to, do better, be better, serve more, help more, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And corollary to that, what's your take on the value of personal and professional development, ongoing personal professional development, listening, reading, studying? What do you think?
Scale of 1 to 10, it's a 25. It like you in a certain way, without being judgmental or diminishing about anybody, in a certain way, if you're in business and you're not doing that, I can't take you seriously. And it just because without perspective, especially if you take the last 20 years and how everything's just sped up, right? Like I think back to business when I was a kid and seeing what I could see, everything was just a slower pace, and you could get away with being less efficient or less educated, and things were just simpler. It's very complex now in comparison, because information is everywhere. Everybody's learning whether they want to or not, because they scroll through Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and there's this new thing that hits them, and it's like, oh, AI is the thing. And it's like, that is creating a situation where if you're not continually learning above that average of where people are learning, you're in trouble, right? Like I don't know anybody that's doing well in business that isn't doubling down on continued learning and continued exposure to higher knowledge.
Yeah, not only that, I tell you, man, one of the other things that I constantly remind myself of, it also keeps you young, keeps your brain fresh. I went back and I shared this with you. I saw a program at DePaul University, a master's degree in education on global citizenship and value creating education. Where do the boundaries stop? Where do they start? What is the difference between people, et cetera? And I got myself a master's degree. It took me 4 years for no reason other than I wanted to know, what is a global citizen? What does that look like? And so I have a master's degree in education just because I felt like it. On top of the PhD that I have in law and a couple other, I just love being a geek, man. And being a geek is key. And I'm always going to masterminds, learning some, talking to people like you. And I'm going, wow, man, this Josh guy, he's really smart. I need to learn from him. And like, see if it rubs off on me a little bit, Now, speaking of that, you mentioned AI. It is the topic. I put my first video on my YouTube channel about AI. We're now streaming our AI mastermind, and I watched the viewership triple overnight. I was like, okay, this was a really good idea. Let's do more of that. But what's your take? What's your take in terms of the importance of people as entrepreneurs playing with it, understanding it, studying it? What do you think?
I think it's one of those things that's here to stay. It's not dissimilar to listening to Gary V from 2006, right? Like he's like, this is the new emerging thing, social media. You guys all need to be on board. If you're not doing something on social, you're just not going to exist in most cases, or just on the fringes. I think we're on the same kind of revolution with AI, and I don't think it's as stark as some people are saying it, where it's like it's going to create a separation of the people who understand it and don't. It is going to create a separation of people who use it and don't. But fortunately, there's a whole bunch of people that do understand it, that are creating tools and solutions for people who don't, to be able to utilize it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to integrate into the culture in many different ways, both positive and negative. And to not pay attention to it is actually going to leave you subject to to potentially be an unintentional victim to some very deceptive, quote unquote, magic tricks that it can pull, right? If you can imagine on the negative side, we've got the potential next year, especially with it being an election year, like who knows what we're going to see in fake AI type messaging and videos and voices and these things. Some people are going to use that really poorly, and we've got to have enough awareness to understand this may or may not be a real thing that we're hearing. But from a business standpoint, the advantages are endless. Like if I can tell you that you can do 10 times as much in the same amount of time, and even if you decide to be lazy about it and only do 5 times as much, you're still 5x where you were at, just because you had the ability now with AI to take care of some pretty vital tasks in your business. And I think the more people get to understand the nature of it, and the more they can treat it like it's actually a human, they'll actually get a lot better result out of it. I think once people make that leap, it's here to stay forever. And I think a lot of the emerging tech is just going to instill that in our society.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught it already, but it's been like just a couple days that DALL-E just got integrated in with ChatGPT-4. I was having some fun yesterday creating some images just like on a mastermind calls, like, watch this, people. Yep. Bing. And it was done. Like, wow, that's a little ridiculous. And I find myself almost like a kid in a candy store going, I wonder if I can do this. Yep. I wonder if I can do that. And it's actually super fun. I love what you said about treat it like a human, because that's how I feel. I'm speaking to a brain. And I heard somebody say this, and I can't remember who, because I'd give them the credit, that instead of viewing AI as your assistant, view yourself as the assistant to AI. Because then I'm taking a position of saying, there's this giant brain out there that I can tap into and I can support as an assistant to bring this great content down. I like that approach a lot better. I thought that was a very interesting perspective that helped me.
Well, it's interesting because it's similar to what we've already talked about with magic and marketing. To use AI, you have to cultivate focus, right? And so your prompting is setting boundaries for it to operate within. And I kind of give people an example on it, an illustration to better understand it. Like if you had a new employee start today and you didn't tell them anything else, they walk in the door and you say, hey, how's it going? Good to meet you. I need you to send an email out to our list. Like, well, what does that mean? Like the new employee is dumbfounded. Like, okay, I'd love to help, like, but tell me how, right? Oh yeah, I should probably train you on how to do this properly, right? And I think some people think AI training is about the technical side of AI training. What it actually is treating it like that employee of like, oh, well, let me explain to you more about our company values and what kind of communications we put out, what's good communication, what's bad. Here's the email tools and systems that we use. Here's the way we like to format it. We insert this kind of writing style or humor or this or that. And you go through this big, long session with that employee to get them on board to do it. And now they know what to do and they can just go do it. That's the same way that I treat AI, is like, let's actually train it like a human, tell all of the things that we would tell a human if we were teaching our kids or a new employee how to do something. Then when you ask it to do it, that big brain focuses down and goes, here's what you need. And it's this little part of that big brain, but it's very precisely executed.
It's interesting you would say that, because I found that in our AI mastermind, what people are the most in awe of is to be able to think like the brain. In other words, it's not how cool are these prompts. It's, okay, what is the outcome needed or desired? What is your skill set in your ability to communicate that desired outcome with all of the parameters needed to keep it focused and whatever? And that's the part that's like, okay, you have to think like a business person. You have to reverse engineer things. And when you do it that way, the output is frankly short of phenomenal. I remember when I was still playing early on with Chat GPT 3.5. And at that point, having written now 20 books and a lot of stuff, I was like, okay, my stuff's still better.
Yeah.
Now I relinquished that completely. My stuff is not as good as what AI can write, as long as it's prompted correctly. I'm getting better output from AI than I can get from myself in one fraction of the time. I mean, nothing, like you said, 20th of the time. Crazy.
Yep.
Super crazy. All right, here's one for you. If you could step back in time, you got the thing of click, 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 and have a conversation with the Josh Beechraft of 20 years ago. And by the way, the answer, oh, I wouldn't change anything. That's not an answer. We're not, that's not acceptable. What would you want to communicate to younger Josh with all that you know today, if you could do that?
Yeah. It's interesting because that's actually, even though a common and great question to ask, it's actually deeply personal in a certain way. And one of the things that I think's important on that is to treat it as such. So if any of you are asking the same question, I'm going to give my answer, but like, I want to compound on, like, that's one of those another, like, small hinges swing big doors. I would go back and explain to that younger me that I'm more valuable than I realize. Because part of being shy and not understanding things created certain boundaries for me, that I believed things that weren't true, because that's what the evidence I was seeing. And if I could show that to that part of myself back then, the part that people see today and appreciate today, and the things it's allowed me to help, you know, many, many people and serve in ways that I'm very blessed to be able to do, would have happened 20 plus years ago, instead of needing to take that time to get there, and the impact would be compounded from there. So I think it's, for me, it's definitely that your value is not diminished and shouldn't be overlooked. And if you look in the right places, you'll see more of it than you ever thought you could ever see. And I think it's still true for me today, even though I've grown that far. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, very, very profound. I love that. All right, man. Final question for you. 3 books or resources that you would recommend for the budding entrepreneur, whether that's budding in years or budding in entrepreneurial experience. What would those be?
Yeah. So my number one book recommendation, since it's come out for entrepreneurs, is not an entrepreneurial book, but I think it's so important to understand. And it's David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. Understanding the things that he's talking about in that book in terms of mental toughness and what you're actually capable of, I think is a foundational things that keeps really smart people from being able to kind of get where they want to go with their entrepreneurship. Second to that, that's more of an entrepreneurial book. I'm a big fan right now, not because the knowledge is so new, but he's done such a good job of packaging it. Alex Hormozi's $100 Million Leads. Offers is very good as well, but Leads is really well thought out and really well put together in a very tight way if you want to understand more about just marketing and how to move people to take an action. And then third to that, there's probably other books that deserve to be here, and maybe that's true of all of them, but there's one that I've found highly interesting, and it comes back to, you know, capabilities of humans again. I not only found it really entertaining, but it did open my mind in another way in terms of human capability, and that is The Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler. It's not a business book. It's about flow states and the things that happen while achieving flow states. And the way that I found it useful in business is there's some key things that happen before you hit a flow state that you might think are negative, but are actually about to unleash in a way. And when you can see that and predict that within yourself, and you can organize those kind of things into your day, you become that much more productive. So very cool book. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I've not heard of that one. I got to check that out. That's great. Love that. Always love to hear about a new resource.
Yeah.
I am constantly just devouring one book after another. And as soon as we finish this, pop your address in the chat and I'll send you one too, also. So, as we're wrapping this up, man, thank you. It's been just absolutely fantastic. Final words. What would you want to leave the young entrepreneurs, either young in experience or age, with? Final thoughts from Josh Beechraft as we're wrapping this up. What would you want to say to the entrepreneurs?
Yeah. I think it's really that this whole business game isn't about business. It's really about relationships. It's just an extension of human consciousness. It's not a category of its own. It's only a category of its own when we need to compare it to something else. But real business is just real human interaction. If we put a price tag on something, that doesn't change its value or way that it serves somebody or anything else. It's truly just people being people. And I used to make a big deal out of it that it was something different than that, because you're learning new habits if you're younger, and you're stuck in old habits if you're older and not consciously getting out of those habits. And sometimes it's easy to forget that this is truly just humans being humans. There's no business, doesn't really exist. It's just humanity.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that, brother. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the time on behalf of our entire community and the entrepreneurs out there in the world that will have the pleasure of seeing this. Deeply appreciate you. And thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be on. I love that you invited me to come on and we got to hang out some more. It's awesome.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. All right, man. Ciao for now.